Welcome to the Kickstart podcast, where we highlight the stories of how professionals kickstarted and navigated their very successful careers. My name is Preston, and on this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who has done a great job navigating her career, from first being a recruiter at a well-known fast-growth tech company to then growing and becoming the head of talent acquisition at another well-established tech company out of New York City. Jackie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. So I guess a great way to start is for those who don't know who you are, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, high level?
Sure. I'm Jackie. I'm head of talent, as you said, here at JustWorks Labs. I live in New York, based in New York. All the companies I've worked for have been in New York. Very much active in the tech industry. My background is kind of in the SaaS space, but yeah, I've been a recruiter for the last 6 or 7 years at this point, and hopefully will be a recruiter for the next 6 to 7 years coming.
Fingers crossed. That actually, brings me to my first question. So do you remember, you probably do you remember your first recruiting job? And then how did you get into recruiting? Like, did you know about recruiting for a while? Maybe you had friends or family that was in recruiting beforehand, but walk me through, how did you find your first job? And was it just a cold kind of application that you filled out online, or how did it work out?
Yeah, it's kind of like a combination. So I studied psychology in college. I went to NYU, and I knew from the point I graduated that I was definitely interested in working with people, getting to talk to people, very human centered work. But what I did learn from my degree is that I'm not necessarily super interested in the clinical and research components that psychology trained me for. So I started looking into jobs when I graduated that had a people element to it. And that's kind of what got me into my first role, which was a recruiter at a translation company. And my role there was recruiting freelance translators. So it's the biggest translation company in the world. It's a huge organization, thousands of employees. I guess what I took away from that role was that I really enjoy the hunt of recruiting, or the challenge of it, finding really niche roles and having to find somebody that fits into this small box.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I knew I was really into recruiting, but what I knew I also really wanted to do was get into the tech industry and the startup industry. I kind of got the sense pretty early on in my career that big corporations weren't really for me, and that I do enjoy the small, tight-knit, collaborative, aspect of being in a smaller org or startup org. And so I was really excited when I got my first role at Teachable. That was my leg into the startup world and the tech world, where I started as a sourcer. And when I left, I was at just technical recruiting level. But I think each recruiting role I've had, I've been able to take away a lot from, whether that be how to be a better recruiter or just learning more about the industry itself, which is, super important in our type of work. But that was kind of my journey into recruiting, and here I am.
Yeah, super cool. So you had a degree in psychology, which I want to ask you just straight up, after being a recruiter for now almost 6 years, do you find that studying psychology helped you be a better recruiter, or it was kind of maybe
not at all?
You could have just made up your answer,
yeah,
Preston, you know what? I think if you want to be a recruiter, you got to have a degree in psychology, but I appreciate your honesty.
I think recruiting is a pretty unique role in that, I really think you can kind of come from any background as long as it's where you want to be. I will say that I think recruiting is meant for people that like interacting with people and communicating and dealing with people on a very, human level. For folks that just like to get their job done, be in front of a computer, not talk to people, which a lot of people, are like that. I would say recruiting is not necessarily the path for you, but I think any kind of degree could be useful. I don't think any specific, degree would kind of get you here.
Have you ever met a recruiter that did not like interacting with people just in your career?
I have actually.
Do they
I think
exist?
I think if you asked them, they would be like, I really do like talking to people, but my own impression of them has been like, do you though? But I think that you have to I don't think anybody would be happy in the field. So I do have to concede to if they say they like dealing with people, then I think they must, because otherwise I don't see them staying in this field for very long.
Yeah, me too. So I would love to talk about Teachable a little more and of course your current job, but I'm fascinated. So this translation company, did you apply to be like a recruiter or did you kind of move into that role?
I applied. The title wasn't recruiter at the time,
Mm,
because a lot of the recruiting I was doing was external, so hiring freelancers as opposed to internal like employees, and it was
mm,
strictly for translators. So I wasn't looking for like tech or, product or anything like that. I did apply for this position that I saw was entry level and would consist of me basically searching and getting people interested who have like translation background. So I would reach out and I would get them certified. They'd have to take a little test to prove they know the language. And then I would get them into the system so that they would
mm.
be eligible to get work to do translations.
Gotcha. And it was at this experience, it was like your first foray into recruiting. Like, you know what? I think recruiting is pretty cool. I can see myself having a career in it. And then you said that you also had an interest to kind of explore more the technology industry, maybe smaller companies, fast growth companies. And that's kind of the real impetus of why you left. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say
Mm,
so. I think a lot of what really excited me about that role is that I was tasked with finding translators for very like obscure and specific languages that there aren't a lot of speakers in for like medical reasons and things. But
mhm.
there aren't a ton of, native speakers. So it would be really challenging to find translators in certain languages, and going out and kind of hunting them down and getting them interested and onboarding them and all of that kind of got me hooked into recruiting. And that was kind of my aha moment of I definitely enjoy this work, but I think I would like to test out a different field. And yeah, that's what brought me to Teachable.
One more question to that point. So how do you find, like, what was the best platform that you use or tool you use to find translators? Like,
Aha,
if
good
people are
question. My
listening, they're like, you know
secret.
what? I want a career in recruiting translators. Jackie, what is the secret? Where do you find these great people?
I would actually get very, very creative. So I would look at, oh my God, all kinds of things. This takes me back, but I would look at like a lot of colleges that teach,
Mm,
professors that are teaching the language. I would look at a lot of like cultural museums. A lot of these languages are like Native American languages that there's just a small number of speakers in, and a lot of them have like just like associations, and like I said, museums was a big one. I would just like use Google. There was no one platform that would get me to the people I was looking for. I would really just like research the hell out of it until I like got somewhere.
I think that's cool. I think it's very easy, especially in our industry in recruiting, to just focus on like one platform like OG LinkedIn and kind of forget that,
Right.
recruiting has a creative aspect to it too. And you can utilize a lot of like different tools or underserved tools or channels, and even maybe go offline to meet people. That
Yeah.
was like the OG recruiting before the internet came, right? And we did everything digitally. And so I've never heard of someone recruiting translators before, Jackie, until now. So I just was
Yeah.
personally curious. And
It was
so
definitely interesting.
hey, I mean, if anything gave you like a tool skit, no, what am I saying? A toolkit that you can just leverage
Yeah.
later in your career. So, okay. So then you stumbled upon a really cool company called Teachable. If you're listening, you probably heard of it. Really well known, great brand recognition. How did you get into this company? Like, was it also a cold apply? Did a recruiter reach out to you? Like,
No, it was a cold apply. I came across them, I think, on Built in NYC, and
oh,
I thought the product was really cool. I was really interested in both like the company itself, the culture, the people, and the product, which I thought was really exciting and like a really cool product to work on. For those who don't know, Teachable is it's a platform for creators. It's for people who have anything that they want to impart wisdom on the world, and you can very easily create a kind of like a deck to put your material in, and then you can make money from it. So it was
mhm.
really big during the pandemic when a lot of people were losing their jobs, and we have this great platform that really helps people to create a course in absolutely anything that they have, skills in, and actually get money from it. It was really, very satisfying platform. And I think it's still, I have nothing but good things to say about Teachable. I think it's a really great company. I was really lucky to get my foot in the door when I applied, and I was so excited to get to go through the interview process. And it was just like such a blessing to get that job.
Speaking of the interview process, what was that like? Like, do you remember like how many stages there were? Did they ask you to do any assignments?
Yeah,
Anything like that?
it started with an intro call with my former boss, who was the recruiting manager. I
Mhm.
reported directly to him, and following the intro call, I had a really basic take home. He essentially asked me, he gave me a like an old job posting and said, like, give me 3 candidates that you think would fit into this position and write a short like outreach message. So I did that, and then following that, they had me come in for an interview, and that was the whole thing. So it was pretty straightforward. And what I liked about the assignment is that it gave me a chance to kind of figure out more about the product, which I think was really helpful for the interview, that I had like a deeper understanding of what the platform actually does. And yeah, it was a very smooth process.
And would you say that like from the colleagues that you know or other people in our industry, like that seems to be kind of a typical interview process for other recruiters from your knowledge?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it depends a little bit on whether or not the position is just like a sourcing position or a coordinator position or, you know, a senior level recruiter position. I don't think I would necessarily get the same assignment at this point in my career. I think it is geared toward like more of a sourcer coordinator type level, but
Mhm.
I think it's pretty standard. I think it shows that you can like find candidates that have the relevant skills, and that you can like craft together an outreach message that kind of has a hook that, you know, doesn't make people want to just like skim past it and hit delete when they get it.
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess to give more context to the listeners, when you joined, like how big was the company on average, and how big, you said obviously you interviewed with your future hiring manager, right? The recruiting manager. So how big was the recruiting or TA team? How big was Teachable when you first joined?
There were about 70 when I
Oh,
joined and around 200 when I left,
wow.
which was, yeah, which was amazing to get to see and be a part of that growth. It was really incredible.
And that's what a lot of people inspire to do, just try to find a company that they believe in that is going through that rapid growth and kind of just ride that wave. And I
Yeah.
can imagine probably how hectic your day-to-day lives were on the TA side to support that growth. So I guess, do you remember like on how many positions you were responsible for at a given time, or maybe at the peak?
I guess at the point that I left, I was handling like maybe 5 or 6. Sometimes it would vary. Like if, for example, we have 3 slots open for just a mid-level software engineer, I wouldn't consider that as big of a lift as like 5 separate jobs that are all very different, because you can
Mhm.
kind of lump them into one. But I recruited across the board. So it was not just engineering and product. I recruited a lot for on the marketing side, the business side, the finance side, really every aspect of the business I got to recruit for at one point or another. But that was also really, really interesting. I definitely prefer personally to recruit on the tech products eng side, but I think one of the benefits of recruiting across the board is you really get to interact with every department in the company, where you wouldn't necessarily get to interact with otherwise, and get to know their needs. You get to know about the team. So it's really interesting and satisfying to be kind of get to just be involved in every different component of the company and feel like you really are making some kind of impact on the business.
Yeah, I think impact is key, right? So easy just to be kind of like focused or siloed just on one small thing. And then you can be like, oh my God, am I actually making a difference? Let alone like, am I
Yeah,
going crazy just doing the same thing over and over again, right?
right. Yeah.
So 70 people, that's actually a good size. When you left, there were about 200. So for people who are excited to maybe follow in your footsteps and maybe break into tech or maybe get another tech recruiting job, like what was your day-to-day like as kind of a recruiter at a fast growth company like Teachable?
So I think I got a really good like career ladder at Teachable. I started as a sourcer, which consisted of me, you know, having 1 or 2 jobs that I was focused on and just outreach like all day. Basically, once I started to get candidates that were interested, I showed a lot of interest in just not just passing them off to the recruiter to handle. I really wanted to be a full cycle recruiter. You know, I talked to my boss and I made that very clear. Like, I don't want to just be a sourcer. I'm happy that that's my title and that's what my main job is, but I really want to, you know, take a candidate through the full process. And luckily enough for me, that was an option, which I think is another great part of being at a startup versus a company. You kind of get to merge into the roles that you want to be, taking on. But I guess my day to day consisted of talking to hiring managers, giving them updates, syncing on candidate profiles, making sure I'm on the right track. Sometimes I would like to, at the start of a search, sit down with a hiring manager, just go through like a handful of profiles, making sure I'm on the right track. And if not, I would need to, change course a little bit. Then after, doing a bunch of calls, getting candidates to on-site, it would be the same sort of touching base with the hiring managers, making sure the candidates that I'm bringing in are good fits. And I loved getting to see through to the offer phase. At the beginning of my time there, I would shadow in on the offer calls. And then as I got more confident, I would lead them with my manager shadowing me, and then made it to the point where it was like a piece of cake. I was able to handle them on my own. I would do them every day, and I kind of got the gist of how it works. That kind of negotiation game. But yeah, that was my day to day, I would say, for the most part.
Thank you for sharing that. And then I think one question that we get a lot about fast growth companies is like, wow, like, Jackie joined, for example, Teachable when they were 70, she left when they were 200. So, did Jackie actually end up like hiring like 100 people herself, right? Like a lot of people can think about that. So like I
wish.
I'd be speaking with like, you'd be like the top 0.00001%. So for people who are just unfamiliar with like startups and just how it works, or just internal teams, like, you and the team probably hired a little over 150 people by the time that you left. So what are, like, aside from obviously your direct efforts and the team members' efforts that are obviously doing a lot of outreach to the candidates, like what are other kind of great tools that you guys use that just help build the pipeline and make some great hires?
Yeah, so I guess I would say some of the tools I love and used at both Teachable and my current job are some of the, pretty well-known hiring platforms like Hired. I am a big Hired user. I love Underdog and huge on LinkedIn. I mean, I would be lost without LinkedIn. I think that's my 99% of my day spent on LinkedIn, and just like networking in general, going to meetups and events like that, where you can kind of, stealthily make introductions and connect with people, and then they think of you when they're looking for their next role, and they don't even necessarily know that that's even the case when you meet. Just, I would say networking is it's really big, making in-person interactions. And one of my favorite techniques to getting hires is referrals. I think nobody's going to refer somebody to the company that they think is like not going to be a team player, is not going to be like an asset to the company. I think referrals are just really great at bringing in talent that's both like an asset to the company from a skills perspective, but also like a culture fit. So I always love to leverage that as well.
I love referrals.
Me
Referrals,
too.
networks, word of mouth. Best way to get any candidate or any lead or anything,
100%.
right? Because you have that like extra degree of credibility that's already been established by the mutual friend.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, you mentioned other great platforms, Underdog, Hire. I'm very familiar with all those. That's super cool. And is there a reason why maybe, for example, like you left, like people could be wondering, oh, I mean, you've done so well there. Why not just like, hunker in, put your heads down and just try to maybe grow with Teachable?
Yeah.
Like what was kind of your thought process at that time?
Start by saying I love Teachable, and it was a very difficult decision to leave in the first place. I actually wasn't even looking to leave, but I got reached out to by you actually about this really cool opportunity, a very unique opportunity actually, that I don't know that I would have left Teachable for something that I wasn't like very intrigued by and very excited by, like this opportunity. So if you came to me with something else, I would have been like, okay, thanks, but I don't know. But right. But I think this kind of this role and what we're doing here, I think is one of the most unique and biggest growth opportunities that I've had in my career. So for context to listeners, JustWorks Labs is a brand new startup. We're an independent company. However, we're owned and funded by JustWorks. So we're something of a part of JustWorks, but we're kind of like a startup within this well-established company. So JustWorks is at 1,000 employees. They're large, they're doing really well. The business is in a really good spot. And that gave sort of leeway to come up with a new product that's going to complement the existing platform. And we realized the best way to do that is to start our own company where we can be our first customer and make sure that the product that we're building is, as good as it possibly can be. So that was sort of the idea as to why we're a separate company instead of, within JustWorks. But, what made this opportunity really unique is when I joined or when I started, we were 5 employees in this company. And while we do have the resources of JustWorks at our disposal, in certain areas and when we need them, for the most part, we are separate and independent. So we don't share their recruiting team. All of our engineers, we build from the ground up. We're not using the existing product or anything like that. So it's kind of like a clean slate. And I never gotten the opportunity to work this early on at a company. And a lot of the fear that I would have had at working at a company this early on is, what about there being a space in the market and where's the money coming from? And what if it doesn't last? But a lot of that fear was kind of put to rest by having JustWorks at our back. And JustWorks is a great company and a well-known company. I didn't have anything big to worry about. And it was just this really cool opportunity to be the first recruiter in this company to grow this whole team. We have aggressive hiring plans. We're hiring all over the board. When we started, we were 5. Now we're 20, which seems small, but over the last year, it feels like a really big accomplishment for us. And we're continuing to grow. We're hiring like crazy. And I think it's immensely satisfying to get to make as big of an impact as I am in this role. Not to say that I didn't feel like that in my previous role, but the level to which I feel the impact I'm making here is it's amazing. And I love kind of getting to be the leader of the recruiting side, the first one to do it, the first one to make the recruiting process and come up with like procedures and our onboarding plan and all of it. It's been a really rewarding opportunity for sure.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. And a couple of things I want to touch on is I want to reiterate that you weren't even just actively looking when I reached out to you. And I think what really ultimately helped you make that decision is it was truly at that time like a really unique opportunity, just a startup within a startup and early stage startup without like the issues of most early stage startups. And so for someone at that point, before I reached out to you, Jackie, like you had experience getting different types of jobs from applying yourself. Was this the first time that actually someone like a recruiter actually reached out to you for like another recruiter role?
No, I was approached fairly, I don't want to say often, but I was approached pretty regularly by recruiters when I was at Teachable, but nothing quite as exciting as this, obviously. And it was a big jump for me in my career to go from being on a team of, I don't know, maybe like 5 recruiters at the time. I had like my boss who would guide me and lead me and very much hold my hand in a lot of ways. The process was already in place and I was just kind of going through the steps. Whereas here, there is no process. I have to create the process. And that was definitely extremely terrifying. I was like, what if I can't hack it? I've never been in that kind of position before. I've never, created a process from scratch. I've never chosen an ATS and built all of this from the ground up. So I was definitely nervous when I was approached by you about this big opportunity, but it was, too exciting to turn down. And I tried to not let my fear of failure, get in the way of my excitement about the opportunity. So I was really excited to do the interview and, thankfully got hired.
Did it ultimately maybe come to that, Jackie? You were like, you know what, like this is such a unique opportunity. If I don't go forward, I might regret it because just the nature of it being so unique and it crossed off all the boxes you're looking for, despite some of the maybe like, either red flags, concerns that you might have had. Is that kind of like your thought process at that time? Because when you joined Teachable, that's 70 people. That may not have seemed early stage for you, but for people listening, they're like, oh my God, that sounds like a super small company. And then you left that to an even smaller opportunity, right? And for a lot of people, they're like, oh my God, that's even like riskier. But like, if you were obviously listening past 30 seconds, it's not just a standalone independent company. It's one that's obviously incubated and funded by a much larger company. So that probably mitigated a lot of the fears that you had. But like, what ultimately like pushed you to kind of accept to go to from a company that you're already doing such good work in at Teachable to leave that and to start completely brand new?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just because I wasn't even really looking, right? I was just kind of brought this opportunity. And once it was brought to me, it was, something I couldn't ignore. I guess what it came down to is this is just, I've never heard of an opportunity like this. They don't come every day. Even in the time I've been here, it's rare to see opportunities to start at a company this early on and make such a jump in your career from kind of being, on a really tight-knit team of recruiters that you're constantly interacting with and have these shared experiences and resources, to being, the first and only recruiter at a company. I think it was just such a jump in my responsibilities in my role that I felt like I would be crazy to not go for it. Plus, I was really fascinated by, what the products that we're building here. I was extremely fascinated by my manager here, Ken, who is running this company, who is brilliant. And he has a way of talking that is very motivating and makes you feel like anything is kind of possible. And I see him doing that with not just me, obviously, but with the whole company. And he's a great leader in that way, and kind of gets us really motivated about the products, which is funny because payroll, it's not the sexiest product in the world. Payroll is payroll, but to make it so exciting and interesting, I think is a talent that Ken has. And the benefits far outweighed any of the concerns I had. And my concerns were mostly like, will I be able to handle this? Like, what if I fail? And at the end of the day, what if I fail? I have to find something new, take a step back, reevaluate what I'm looking for. And like, if that happens, okay, like I learned something from it, I took away something from it. But what if I don't fail? And what if I don't let my fear of failure, get in the way of me taking on this kind of position? And thankfully, I haven't failed yet. And like I said, failure is natural, it happens. And I was prepared to come in and, bomb the job and not be able to make it. And you kind of have to weigh the risks with the rewards. And for me, this role was like the rewards were far outweighed the risks.
Yeah.
So
I think that's amazing. And I know it was some time ago where we actually, like, I personally kind of helped you with this position, but I just remember, like, first of all, being the recruiter and you being on the other end, like, you were just amazing to work with. Like, you were super responsive.
You too.
And which, thank you.
Yeah.
Which is the whole reason why, like, we were able to really just condense the process for you and just get you through the process as fast as possible. So obviously speed really, really helped. And one thing that we did not mention, I do want to touch upon, is you were also interviewing with other companies at the moment too. It wasn't just like, hey, it wasn't like Stay at Teachable or JustWorks, right? It was, you had a couple other contenders, and some of them were obviously much larger companies, even within the big tech space. And when you think of like big tech, people are like, oh my God, these are gigantic companies, and compensation would be amazing. My life and career is set. Everyone on the face of the four corners of the world know about these companies. And so I think what makes it even more astounding, just to talk about this a little bit more, is, you walked away from that too to join, again, like a smaller company, which only had 5 people at that time, where you could have failed, right? Maybe your probability of failure was much higher than joining like the big techs of the world. So if you could just share maybe your thought about, like, what was it to have you walk away from that? Because you as a recruiter, me as a recruiter in tech, like we can see the power of big tech just from branding alone. And for some people, like, just the fact that they're interviewing there, it doesn't matter if they're interviewing at 20 other companies. They just want to see the interview through. And if they get an offer, they're going to obviously like put 99% of the weight on it, versus other companies that, they might have a better career fulfillment or comp, right? And so, like, what went through your mind?
Yeah, it's funny. I know I keep saying I wasn't looking, but I actually was approached at the same time as you approached me by a recruiter at Google to join their YouTube team as a recruiter, which I got to say was kind of, appealing at the time. I was like, woo, Google, like, okay, I want to see what they have to say. So around the same time, maybe a little earlier, actually, they reached out to me than you did. And I started the process. I will say the process was not quick like this one was, like working with you was. It was a, 3-4 week ordeal, which is fine. I think that's pretty standard for, larger companies. There's a lot more heads in the mix that have a say. But I made it to the on-site portion of the interview process with them, and I sort of shut it down once I realized I went through the interview, but I shut it down afterwards. I think they were gearing up to make an offer, but they said it was going to be like another 2 to 3 weeks. And it's not so much that I didn't want to wait. I would have waited if it was an opportunity for me, but some things irked me during the interview with them, and nothing that I think is bad. I think there's a lot of benefits to joining a large company, especially, these names like Google, Facebook, Amazon. They're undoubtedly, good opportunities. And I don't have any negative to say about it. I think to each his own. If working in a large org suits you, then, you should go for it. But the things that kind of made me a little wary were during the interview, I kept hearing people kind of refer in the Google interview. A lot of times they would refer to their recruiters as this army of recruiters. Like you'd be joining this army of recruiters, like they get things done, like they hustle and they're an army, they have each other's backs, like good things. But at the time I was just like, do I want to join an army of recruiters where I'm one in like hundreds? And I think there's a lot of benefits to being in a position like that. You learn from your coworkers, you have so much collaboration, you can kind of have a team member to vent to or to share work with, or when you go away they can take over and vice versa. And I think that's great. Like I don't think, being in an army of recruiters is necessarily a bad place to be. I think it's a great place to be. However, I had these two very different opportunities in front of me. I had this Google opportunity, and then I have this JustWorks opportunity where, Google, I'm one joining a team of, 100, 200 plus recruiters, or I could be a lone soldier, so to speak, and be the only recruiter in this team, a tiny team of 5 people where, we don't have any of the resources that Google has. I do imagine, the compensation package would have been really competitive, but at the end of the day, that's not exactly what motivated me. It wasn't necessarily, compensation or like the flashy Google name. It was kind of the opportunity that was calling to me. And I think at the end of the day, what really made me excited when kind of looking at the roles back to back was being this like lone soldier and kind of inventing the process and creating the structure of recruiting at this company versus being, brought into a position where I don't feel like I'm making as much of an impact. Not to say that they're not making a huge impact, where of course they are, but the impact to me feels greater in the smaller environment where the team and everything it's a whole different, situation. And at the end of the day, I don't think I was ready to stop being in the startup world. I love the startup space. I love the fast-paced environment of it. And it's definitely very, very different than working in these big, massive companies. I think everything about it is different, but it's something I wasn't ready to give up yet. And at the end of the day, the opportunity here was just a lot more appealing to me. So that's what kind of led me to shut it down and take on this role.
It's an incredible story, and it doesn't happen as often as you would think if you're listening. And so like, I remember when I'm like, Jackie, like, are you interviewing anywhere else? Like, yeah, I'm like, well, cool, where? And then I remember when you dropped the G word, and I remember it's like it's like the recruiter's worst nightmare. It's like you have a candidate you're really excited about, they drop Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, and you're like, oh my God, like it's over. Like why would somebody
hate it too. Yeah.
Right? Like why would somebody say no? And I think kudos to you though. I have to give you credit. I think a lot of it is knowing what you want too. I think Facebook and Google versus small start, it's apples and oranges. And nothing is, there's no right or wrong answer. It's like whatever best suits your personality or your work ethic or whatever you want in your next job. And that's kind of what you have to choose that matches that perfectly. And like for me, my role at that time was to just help you make the best decision for yourself. Obviously, at that time, I was biased and like I would love nothing more than for Jackie to join. But like I knew at that time though, like you were genuinely interested in JustWorks. So like I did whatever I could do. Like if you had any concerns or questions, you want to meet other people, talk to Ken, like that's what recruiters are there for, to make the experience great and to help kind of resolve any kind of outstanding questions. And then just, the last 10 yards, kind of put it up in the wind and see where the cards fall. And of course, like I was super pumped at that time when you moved forward JustWorks, but then I realized realize like, as the years gone on and the longer you're in recruiting, like stuff like that doesn't really happen that often. And I think when it does, it's really, really insightful to understand like, why did it happen? Because perhaps like it could just be a great learning experience for not just me to hearing the story all over again and reliving it with you again, but also for maybe others who are kind of going through that same situation, either in their own career or maybe they're recruiters guiding candidates in the same situation as well. So I'm just so happy that, you obviously chose to move forward and you're still there. I think the recruiter's best dream is to like place people and then hope that things go well and they stick around for a long time and they continue to crush it. And so to me personally, to work with you as initially like my candidate of mine and now working with you to help scale JustWorks is just like the best 360 of recruiter on the agency side can go through. And of course, developing our friendship along the way. So like, I definitely want to highlight that again and give you kudos. And just, it's really great to see that, you're happy and you're doing some great work there.
Yeah. And kudos to you for bringing me into this opportunity where I would have otherwise never, who knows where I would be today if it weren't for you reeling me in. So thank you to you.
Jackie would
changed
probably
my life.
You'd probably be the CEO Teachable right now, Jackie. So I don't know. I don't know what's better. No, not to flatter Jackie too much. I literally just went to LinkedIn and I keyword top 1% recruiter in New York City, and just Jackie's profile came up. That's it, like no one else. But no, like that's super cool. And to go from, individual contributor, well, starting with sourcer and then now becoming a head of TA where you are responsible of really just creating that whole infrastructure. And I remember back when like that's something that you really want to do and you're really excited about. It's really cool to see you execute and move forward. Now almost 20 people later, like, wow, the team has grown so much. For the last kind of portion here, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts. So how are you on a scale from 1 to 10, how excited and prideful you are as a recruiter today in your career?
And that's easy, 10. I think recruiting is amazing. I love it. And like you said a few minutes ago, there's nothing more satisfying than getting a candidate interested in a role and seeing them, start in a new position and then getting to see them like thrive in a role. I think it's like one of the most rewarding jobs out there.
I want to ask you, so in tech recruiting, because you mentioned you prefer, if you had a choice, you'd rather do like positions within tech. What are your favorite positions to recruit for? And what are your least favorite or most challenging?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have like a least favorite. There's certainly roles that I find to be really interesting. And those usually are the roles that I learn a lot from. I love recruiting for designers because it's fun just to look through people's portfolios and seeing like their artistic capabilities. But I love recruiting for product as well, just product managers. There's so many different kinds of product managers and project managers out there, like handling different kinds of products. And I find it really interesting talking to them and hearing about, how product runs at their company. And a lot of times it's a lot more different than you'd suspect it would be. Least favorite, man, I think the ones that I find to be my least favorites are just the ones that I kind of hit a wall. And those usually tend to not be the engineering roles, which are typically more, black and white. We need an engineer. They need to know how to code. They need to be like decent at it. And if they can, we're happy to work with them. But more of like the business and operations roles are the ones that tend to be a little trickier because they're a little more specific to the business itself and not so much like what's your tech stack and, what do you work with the most and that kind of thing, which is usually, a little more clear. So those roles are a little trickier, but I don't want to say that, just because they're trickier, I don't like them as much. I think those roles that are harder are also even more satisfying once you close them out. Yeah, I don't think I have like a strong least favorite role.
Maybe that's a harsh way of asking that question, but you handled it well. And just what are your thoughts on like what's happening with the market? I know that, well, first of all, it's post 2020, the market just went upside down with the pandemic and everything. And then all of a sudden recruiters became rock stars. We almost became as cool, if not cooler for a short period of time than engineers. And then it kind of stabilized a little bit. And then now recession, right? And so we're seeing, especially in our industry, that's being hit and slammed left, right, and center with layoffs and offers being rescinded. And so what are you guys seeing in terms of like the talent market today? Does it feel similar to what it was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, or maybe just it's the same, or has it been a lot more competitive for you? I know personally speaking, it's certainly the latter with more bidding wars and just ridiculous salary asks that I've never seen before. So like, how are you kind of navigating that from someone on the internal side?
It's crazy. It's been a roller coaster that I almost can't keep up with. It's insane. Like you said, inflation has been playing a huge part in salary asks, and the company has to kind of make up for it if they want to retain talent and attract talent. Thankfully, a lot of that is out of my hands, so I don't need to be the one responsible for making those decisions. But in terms of how challenging it's been, I think it goes through waves. And I think a lot of it, like you said, has to do with the market. And when companies are going through lots of layoffs, that's kind of like a recruiter's, I don't want to say dream, but like nobody likes to see layoffs. It's terrible. But you have all these, candidates that are actively looking for roles, and kind of gives you this huge pool of candidates to source through. But I think companies are also kind of changing the way that work used to be. I know for us here at JustWorks, we like to be in office. We're a hybrid. So we're in the office 3 days a week. A lot of companies are fully remote. A lot of them are like us, they're hybrid. A lot of them are in person only. And I think a lot of times that has like a big impact for candidates. That preference alone will weed out 50% of the candidates I talk to. Once I say we're, in office 3 days a week, they are either really excited. A lot of candidates I talk to are looking to be in an office, and that's, something they are really happy to hear. And a lot of times it's an immediate, like, I'm out situation for candidates that want to be fully remote. And then also competing with companies that are hiring fully remote. You can hire anywhere in the States theoretically, whereas we're kind of siloed into hiring within New York City because that's where our office is. So I think it's been like a up and down roller coaster of challenge. I don't think there's ever been a time where I'm like, recruiting these days so easy. Like, it's a recruiter's dream out there. Everybody's, up for the grabs. But I think there are waves of, like, during those layoff seasons, it's a little, it's always exciting for me to be able to say our company's in a really good spot, financially and on the business side. And that, I hope, is comforting to a lot of candidates that have been impacted by layoffs. But it's definitely an up and down roller coaster.
What would your advice be to the candidates that find themselves in a very unique opportunity where they're like, wow, for the first time in a long time, I can ask for like a salary that's 20, 30, 40% higher than what I would normally ask. And maybe my, experience on paper wouldn't match that. So like, surely for someone like yourself who sees a lot of inbound, you're talking to a lot of candidates every single week, you're probably like, wow, this person has an amazing background, but oof, you look at the salary ask.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Like, do you just, I guess, if you're really excited, would you have a conversation with them? Like, hey, like, this is like a realistic range, like, take it or leave it type of thing? Or
totally.
Like, what would you do in that situation? Or what would your advice be for people in that situation?
I think it's always fair to ask. Like, you have a number in mind, like, ask. And what's the worst that can happen? We say, like, we can't get there. This is where we can get. Is that still interesting to you? And that's kind of how I go about when I see candidates with numbers that I don't know that we'll be able to reach, or that I think are over what I would consider them on paper. I still want to talk to them, of course. If it's like wildly out of reach, maybe I don't know, I would be less quick to jump on a call with them, but I don't think it would stop me. I think it would just be something I would want to make sure to discuss with them on that first call and be like, look, I noticed this is the number you put on that you're looking for. To be honest, this is the number we're able to give you. And I would try to kind of fluff up the opportunity. Like, this is, why I think this is a great opportunity. And I always like to remind candidates that the number that you take going into a job is not your permanent salary by any means. It's just your starting salary. Every company I know of does performance reviews of some sort. And I think right now, in the name of staying competitive, companies have to retain their top talent. They will give you, a raise or a promotion in the future once you've earned it. So I try not to I try to encourage people not to let the number get to them that much when it's only, the beginning of your journey here. And you can always, move your way up if you do hard work. Obviously can't ever guarantee a promotion, but it's within the cards if are a good employee.
I agree.
But,
I agree.
yeah.
I think having people focus on the long term as well, and the potential that your income can grow into is certainly very, very key. And just being honest with each other and see if, an understanding can be can be met. But I think that's really cool, really, really insightful for someone like yourself that's obviously at a company that's growing very, very fast in this market condition. So I know we're running out of time, but I want to ask you, for people who I guess just want to just now, they're listening to this and they're inspired, they're excited to kind of, again, follow your footsteps and work at not one, but multiple tech companies. If you were to give maybe like one big advice that you give to other people, like what would it be?
I guess if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be, I don't know, not to let your fear dissuade you from taking on a new opportunity, to go for it, see it through, go through the interview process, talk to the team. And also, I guess the biggest piece of advice I would say is go listen to your gut. Your instincts may not be right 100% of the time, but even still, I think you always learn something from an opportunity, even if it ends up being something that you wouldn't necessarily want to repeat, or a negative opportunity. But I think your instincts have a lot to say, and you shouldn't ignore them, and going for the opportunities that even you might on paper think like, no, that's like too much for me, that's too much responsibility, that's intimidating. Just go for it, see what it's like, give it a shot, and the interview process will tell you a lot about what the position is going to be like, I guess to say. So ask lots of questions, follow your instincts at the end of the day.
Well, you heard it from her. You heard it from her, the person who walked away from Google to join an even smaller company and is now absolutely crushing it. So for those that want to reach out to you, they want to ask you questions, maybe perhaps they want to apply to JustWorks Labs one of these days, like where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. My full name is Jacqueline Ray Fox. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. So if you have any questions, definitely hit Jackie up. But Jackie, I know our time is coming to an end, but just want to thank you again for just taking time out of your busy day to have a chat and just share your story. And I thought you just done so well navigating your career, making the right decisions, going with your gut, and not being afraid to take chances. And look at where you are now. And so if you're listening and you find yourself in a similar situation, or you're inspired to just take action as Jackie did, definitely hit her up, follow her, and just, again, want to thank you for taking time out. And personally, I'm very, very excited to see your career continue to flourish, and especially in the next couple of years. And on another note, it's been a great full circle conversation, just chatting with you again and hearing about how we met and what you're doing now. And for what it's worth, there's no better feeling than hearing all the great stuff that you're doing. So just want to thank you again, Jackie. We'll certainly keep in touch, and excited to see JustWorks Labs scale to 10,000 people by next year at this rate. So
thank you. Thanks, Preston. And thank you for having me.
You got it. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too.